All right, everybody. Good morning, America. Welcome to Justice for All, the Wyatt Wright Show. I'm Wyatt Wright, and this show is about your rights and the laws that govern us. Rights you've heard about and care about and would certainly miss if they were gone. I've spent half a lifetime watching government go from trying to do what's right and failing to trying to do what's wrong and succeeding. Every year, more and more of our personal rights are erased from the books while Americans stand idly by. Not because we don't care, of course we care, but we're busy enough trying to raise our family, put our kids through school. While we're busying ourselves with life, the metaphorical water temperature is rising all around us, just like the frog that gets boiled without knowing it. On this show, we discuss legal issues that affect you and me, the people of Texas. We'll take a hard look at laws that affect your freedom, your ability to access the courts, your ability to vote, to speak freely, or in short, to live the American dream. Stick around. Today we'll be joined in the studio by San Antonio trial attorney Don Crook and hear his thoughts on how our new laws affect you. Listen, let's dive right in. We've got a lot to talk about. Now listen, I went to the pharmacy the other day and I got some allergy medicine that my doctor prescribed to me. And the pharmacist asked me if I wanted name brand or generic. The name brand was $40 and the generic was $7. So I had a decision to make. It's an easy decision, isn't it? Save some money. After all, the chemical formulations are exactly the same in both drugs. So why would I care? Now here's how generics work. Let's imagine that a big pharmaceutical company discovers a new formulation and the drug is a big hit. In order to protect the company and all the research and development that went into it, we have patent laws that prevent other drug companies from swooping in, taking the formulation and selling it on their own. That makes sense. This patent protection goes on for a period of years, after which it expires and other companies are free to copy it, sell it as a generic at a reduced cost. That's how it works. But here there's a catch you need to know about. Drug companies have historically been subject to regulation by the FDA and by the civil justice system. This is the same civil justice system that keeps Americans accountable for their actions. Things that you do. As an example, it's a civil justice system that keeps businesses honest under a threat of deceptive trade practice laws. It keeps drivers safe under the threat of civil liability. It keeps manufacturers focused on making safe products under threat of answering to a jury if they increase profits at the expense of safety. So it's tort laws in every state that allow injured people to take manufacturers to court if they knowingly design a product and sell it when it's not safe. In the case of drug companies, the FDA plays a role too. They're important. They're responsible for taking a look at proposed drugs to see if there are any glaring safety issues, but the FDA isn't doing tests of its own. They're looking at the research and analysis as provided to them by the drug company. So the civil justice system plays an important role in regulating the actions of these drug companies. Now, until recently, here's how the system worked. Drug companies had a duty to make drugs safe and to disclose dangerous side effects to consumers. If they didn't, they could be brought to court for those failures. But in June of 2011, the U.S. Supreme Court held that, and get this, generic drug manufacturers could not be sued for selling a dangerous drug as long as they copied it from a name brand manufacturer. The court reasoned that all a generic manufacturer was doing was copying somebody else's dangerous drug. They didn't invent it themselves, but you can't haul the inventing company into court for a product that they didn't make and sell. So that leaves the consumer swinging in the wind. What do we do? How absurd is this? By this rationale, and think this through, ladies and gentlemen, by this rationale, I can go out and sell Agent Orange to school children and get off scot-free. Now, this case doesn't extend to that, but as an analogy, that's the way the rationale works. Because I didn't invent Agent Orange, and the court says that if the generic companies didn't invent the drug, then they can't be held accountable. So if a company knows that a drug is dangerous and markets it anyway, it seems to me that company ought to be held responsible. Without regard to whether or not they invented it, should I be held accountable if I start drag racing at an intersection and kill a child? You bet I should. I didn't invent drag racing. The answer's obvious and it's absurd. But we don't know if a drug company's hiding facts when we buy the drugs. In fact, we know that to the contrary, they promote it as being safe, and that's why your doctor prescribes it to you. You only find out when somebody gets injured. Now, I can either pay 10 times as much and get the name brand and hopefully preserve my rights to court if the case warrants it, or I can buy the generic drug, save a wallet full of money, and roll the dice that somebody in my family is not going to get hurt. What a horrible decision to have to make in America. Horrible decision. Even more disturbing is that most consumers don't even know about this. They don't know about this law, and that's what we're talking about today. They don't know about the ruling, and they don't know what they're giving up. What happened to the days where manufacturers stood behind their products and gave a warranty that the product they sell performs as advertised and does so safely? That's the America that I remember, and you remember too. If you just tuned in, you're listening to Justice for All, the Wyatt Wright Show. On this show, we talk about the ever-increasing disappearance of your American rights. The case that we're talking about today is Pleva versus Mensing. It was authored by Justice Clarence Thomas and has widespread implications. Its roots are in something known as federal law preemption. In essence, the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution requires that if a state law conflicts with the federal law, the state law has to fall. Okay, now the issue is raised because the FDA sets the standards to approve drugs. So they do that, they approve a drug, it gets on the marketplace, and those are the issues that were brought to the Supreme Court. Another problem is that it overlooks the benefit afforded by the passage of time. I mean, what if a drug was thought to be safe when it was initially approved and later found to be dangerous? You would expect the manufacturer to step up and do something about it. But under this ruling, generic manufacturers not only don't have to, they cannot do so. They have to provide the same warnings that the name brand drug did. So if a drug is approved in 1978, we find out in 1990 that it's dangerous, no changes can be made to it, and the generic drug manufacturer is insulated even if they learn that there are many deaths a year from that drug. This is insane. It's insane. Under this preemption analysis, the drug manufacturer, the generic one that is, can argue that since the FDA approved the original drug, they're immune to any lawsuits. So can a company learn that its product is dangerous and then hide behind the fact that it was originally approved for sale? Yep. Pleva versus Mensing, United States Supreme Court, June 2011. Coming up, we're going to open the mailbag to see what you have to say to me, so stick around for that. But yet another problem with this analysis is that preemption diminishes any incentive for drug companies to monitor and continue to test the drugs that they sell. Now, in an older Supreme Court case, the Supreme Court actually said that the FDA, and listen to this, the FDA has limited resources to monitor the drugs on the market, and manufacturers have superior access to information about the drugs, especially as new risks emerge. It is state tort suits, says the Supreme Court, that uncover known drug hazards and provide incentives for drug manufacturers to disclose known safety risks promptly. Okay, so why then are Congress and our courts now allowing drug manufacturers to escape all liability for such injuries? That's the topic we're tackling today. Reminder, if you're just tuning in, this is the Justice for All Wyatt Wright Show. Here we discuss the ever-increasing disappearance of your American rights. Time to reach into the mailbag and see what people have to say to me. As always, if you have something to say, send it to me at speakup@WyattWrightShow.com. Speakup@WyattWrightShow.com. Today we've got an email from Carol in San Antonio. Carol writes, I'm worried about the new ruling that allows unlimited corporate campaign contribution funds. It seems like this will have a bad effect on upcoming elections. Why can't corporations play by the rules? All right, Carol, you're referring to the Supreme Court's holding in Citizens United versus FEC. I agree with you, and I believe this is going to cause many problems that we haven't yet thought about. In fact, we covered this very topic on a previous show. Check out our archives at WyattWrightShow.com or go to democracyisforpeople.org. They've got some great information there on what we all can do to combat that ruling. All right, well, I tell you what, today in the studio we have a guest. His name is Don Crook Jr. He's a board-certified San Antonio attorney and the law offices of Wyatt Wright, who regularly handles dangerous drug cases against pharmaceutical companies including ones just like those in the Pliva versus Mensing case. Don, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to be here.
Yeah, you know, and I want to get into Ms. Mensing's case and the repercussions, but first, let me read you a statement from the American Association for Justice, which followed this ruling. Here's what they said. The decision in Pliva versus Mensing is a disastrous outcome for patient safety, giving generic drug companies legal immunity when they ignore harmful side effects of the drugs they manufacture and profit from. This decision eliminates any incentive for drug manufacturers to ensure that their drug is safe and adequately warn consumers about the drug's dangers. Now, is this an overstatement or is this an accurate statement?
No, I would say that pretty much hits it right on the head. This ruling allows the drug manufacturers to accept money to make a profit, but it eliminates any liability, and that's always a bad situation. Think about it with, say, a classroom and you remove the teacher. The students aren't going to behave. On our streets, if you take away the police, no one's going to abide by the traffic rules anymore. And so I think that's really what we have. They have every incentive in the world now to make money with no liability, and their only real recourse now is to simply stop making the drug, which, as we all know, no one is ever going to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's just insane. And that's a good analogy, because what we're really talking about here is the inability to have recourse or accountability when you do something. Now, in this case, Ms. Mensing took the generic form of Reglan prescribed by her doctor to aid with acid reflux. Now, here she is. She's got acid reflux. It's a horrible thing, but it's not the end of the world. But wait a minute. She takes the drug. There's an alleged defect. She claimed that it caused her to contract tardive dyskinesia. What is that tardive dyskinesia?
Tardive dyskinesia is it's a syndrome. It attacks the central nervous system and causes a variety of uncomfortable jerking and distortion of the facial muscles. It would almost look like someone had a twitch in the mild cases, all the way up to looks like someone was having a very severe seizure.
Jeez.
What's really horrible about it is a lot of times the patients, they don't even know they have these facial distortions. And someone has to tell them. For example, they don't know that their tongue is hanging out the left side of their mouth. And the first time they're aware of it is they start to develop sores on their tongue and their cheeks, because they're biting and chewing on a tongue they don't even know is hanging out of their mouth.
Good heavens. Well, I've read that 75% of all prescriptions filled are generic, and that 79% of all brand name drugs have a generic equivalent on the market. So isn't this just a catastrophe waiting to happen for unsuspecting Americans?
Yes, it really is, because, as you said earlier, why wouldn't someone buy the cheaper generic? I mean, I think that's probably what 95% of America will do, and they have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah, and the number of generics hitting the market is growing every year. Listen to this, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, here are some popular drugs that you've heard of that are losing their patents soon, which means they're going to show up in generic. 2011, the drugs Actos, Effexor, Flomax, Imitrex, Levaquin, Lipitor, Lotrel, Plavix, Seroquel, Valtrex, Zyprexa. I mean, do these sound familiar? You see them on late night TV. In 2012, Lexapro, Singulair, and Viagra are coming off patent. And in 2014, Celebrex, Cymbalta, Nexium, and Symbicort. Now, I'm reading that list because I had to write them down, but 9 of the industry's 10 biggest drugs are coming off patent in the next 5 years. Now, doesn't this just set the stage? We're talking, if we think we've got a problem now, what's going to happen then? Are we not looking at millions and millions of Americans who all of a sudden have a problem and nowhere to go?
Yes, we are, and the sad part is this has received no publicity at all, and so these folks have no idea what's waiting for them with these generic drugs. No idea.
Yeah, and that's the horrible thing. And we've got another statistic here, over 2.6 billion with a B generic prescriptions are filled in the U.S. every year, and it grows every year at more than 8%. And this is just something that it can't get smaller. It's only going to get bigger, and their Seventh Amendment rights to go to court are just being diminished. Reminder, you're listening to Justice for All, the Wyatt Wright Show. On this program, we point out and discuss the ever-increasing disappearance of our American rights.